Hey everybody, I'm here with Dr. Jaminet. He is a MIT and Berkeley trained astrophysicist who's worked at Harvard. He's been studying nutrition for the past decade, and given that he forms intelligent positions from his blog, I'm curious as to his opinion on various topics. He's the author of the book called Perfect Health Diet, and he blogs at the website of the same name. Right now, he's running a health retreat, and he's working on a cookbook that should be released soon, and he's also starting a biotech company. Now, can you explain what the Perfect Health Diet is and what it seeks to accomplish?
Yeah, so the perfect health diet is it's an ancestral diet, which basically means it's a natural whole foods diet. Of the sort our ancestors might have hunted and gathered during the Paleolithic. And what's special about it is that we went through the literature uh, on searching on every known nutrient to try and identify the optimal amount of each nutrient that you should have on your diet, and then work backward from that to finding a mix of foods that would deliver optimal nutrition. And so we're trying to get just the right amount of every nutrient, neither too much nor too little, simultaneously. And so that was the strategy of our diet. And it took 5 years of research to figure out how to do that. And it came out being an extremely delicious diet, actually resembles gourmet food, which we realized made sense, that our brain must have evolved to like things that are good for us. And so it makes perfect sense that the most nourishing diet would also be delicious. And so that got us excited. And then we published our book, and it became popular, and we had thousands of readers report that they'd cured diseases and other health conditions with our diet. And so it's been a big success and a lot of fun. And we're still trying to learn and learn how to heal naturally through diet and lifestyle. And we recently started a health retreat business in order to prove that our advice works and to learn more from our guests.
That's great. So basically, you've tried to optimize it nutritionally. Did you also try to include paleo concepts, or?
Yeah, so we started from the paleo template, and then we adjusted things. And we do exclude some foods, and like wheat and soybeans and peanuts, and that's partly evidence driven, but it's also partly driven by our paleo history. And enough people have had problems with gluten or soy that we think we're willing to keep excluding those foods.
What about dietary lectins? Is you worried about that in your diet, or it's mainly just gluten and?
Well, I would say we're probably more worried about digestive inhibitors than lectins. So most lectins are digested fairly well. Many of them are destroyed in cooking, and so many of them aren't necessarily that toxic. But there's a lot of compounds in the cereal grains and the seeds of legumes that grow in grasslands that specifically evolved to sabotage mammalian digestion, because these things are eaten by herbivorous mammals that graze in grasslands, and so they have compounds which tend to be a little more troublesome for us.
So what part of digestion, like stuff that inhibits enzymes?
Yeah, there's some of those. There's amylase inhibitors and and other enzyme inhibitors, but there are also compounds that seem to affect the cells of our digestive tract, and make them not function as well as they should. And so those can be quite problematic. because they can get into the body and disrupt the function of other cells as well.
Which compounds are you referring to as far as the ones that disrupt?
Well, it's not necessarily completely known exactly what the compounds are, but it's definitely known that some of these foods can suppress digestion. So we give the example in our book of wheat bran. If you eat a gram of wheat bran, then your stool weight will increase by almost 6 grams. All right, so it's clearly suppressing digestion and causing more of your food to to go into your stool. But it's not necessarily, the chemistry isn't necessarily known, or the mechanisms.
Hmm, that's interesting. Now, what's your opinion as far as the percentage of health that comes from your diet versus lifestyle versus other things?
Well, lifestyle is a very powerful effect. So I'd say lifestyle is at least a third. Diet is probably comparable to lifestyle. The thing about diet is it's easy to make a disastrous diet that kills you early. You can starve yourself. You can die of thirst in 60 days. So if you go on a hunger strike, um, so in that sense, diet is extremely powerful. But in terms of, people tend to eat fairly well because we do have this evolved brain system which tries to guide us to eating the foods that we need. And, I would say, for most people, diet, the imperfections in their diet, maybe taking 10 years off their life. And that's probably similar to the imperfections in their lifestyle. So I'd probably say those are both about a third each. And then the other third are, I'd say probably the biggest factor is just kind of luck, exposure to infections, and, picking up infections. And, so we all get chronic infections, and the infectious burden tends to grow as we age. And that has a somewhat debilitating effect. And a lot of that is behavior. If you go to the tropics, you're more likely to catch a damaging infection. If you spend time in places that aren't really hygienic, that don't have good sewage, plumbing, or if you engage in a lot of risky behaviors, pick up sexually transmitted diseases or things like that, then you're more likely to have problems.
Interesting. Would you mind, saying what issues that you struggled with in the past?
Some of it is a little bit mysterious, but I definitely had at least 2 chronic infections that were giving me problems. And at least one of them I acquired around birth. And so I was in and out of the hospital through age 4 and had some surgeries for chronic ear infections. And
Did you ever find out which ones they were?
apparently that was due to fungal infections, which would explain why antibiotics didn't help me. And so I ended up getting uh, later on some very significant fungal infections in my ear, and it caused it to swell up, and that was a major discovery when I and my doctor uh, worked out that it was a fungal infection that was causing that. But I almost got in deep trouble from taking antibiotics to try to treat it. And then there was another bacterial infection, which did respond to antibiotics. And then I just had a number of dietary and lifestyle issues, so I wasn't nourishing myself nearly as well as I should have, and my lifestyle wasn't great. So all of those conspired together.
Were you overweight? Was that an issue?
No, I wasn't overweight. So my significant problems, I really started feeling poorly after I took a year-long course of antibiotics for acne in my 20s. And that must have aggregated the fungal infection. And, I was, fatigued and started getting, very slow reaction times, loss of athleticism, loss of memory, impaired mood, and other symptoms. And I just didn't feel right, and I kept getting worse every year.
Mm-hmm. So, how did you get rid of those fungal infections?
Well, I didn't even know I had them for a long time, and it wasn't until I on a, went onto low carb paleo that actually the fungal infection flared up and it became more obvious.
What do you think that was?
Well, carbs are pretty important for antifungal immunity, and also I had a few other. Going on the low carb diet, I gave myself some nutrient deficiencies, like a vitamin C deficiency that impaired antifungal immunity. Uh, so, those were the main things that caused it to flare.
What's interesting is a lot of people think that, carbs cause fungal infections. So if you go on a low carb diet, you'll actually get rid of it. But in your case, the opposite happened.
Yeah, no, that's a mistake. Now, some things, added sugar is a problem. If you're drinking lots of Coca-Cola and eating cotton candy and stuff like that, then you're gonna be at risk for fungal infections. But going too low carb is also a risk for it.
So how did you end up reversing that through your diet, nutrient dense diet, things like that?
Yeah, so improving diet, improving lifestyle, and so you need better immunity, and you also need better friendly bacteria. So in the end, in a lot of places in the body, like the gut, it's really good bacteria that will defeat the microbes for you.
And how did you improve your gut? Probiotics, fiber.
Um, Eating a diverse diet, yeah. So you get a diverse fiber, you get good nutrition, and you support your immune function and your gut health, so that the immune system is constantly trying to shape the gut microbiome to they'll release antimicrobial peptides into the gut where there are inappropriate bacteria, and they'll tolerate beneficial bacteria. And so as long as you're supplying good bacteria, supplying good nutrition, supplying a good environment, usually over time, the balance of power will shift to beneficial germs, and that seems to be what happened in my case.
Why don't you try fluconazole, if you don't mind me asking? If you did.
I did. It, yeah. Um, I I did try antifungals. I got a few liver symptoms out of it, and it wasn't super effective.
That was from fluconazole?
Yeah.
How long were you taking it?
I don't remember exactly. Uh, Probably at least 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, they're usually, and they say they're rare, especially for fluconazole. It's more of a problem with ketoconazole, but that's interesting. Obviously, they're not that, I mean, in your experience.
Yeah, I didn't feel it was as effective. I actually got seemingly better results from something that's sold uh, over the counter. It's actually a veterinary medication called lufanuron, and I got good results from supplementing iodine. But in general, I would say I I didn't really need therapies. It was just diet and lifestyle.
How does the iodine help that? If you take a lot of iodine, it actually increases Th1 immunity. Th17 immune system combats fungal infections.
Well, I would say, well, it's antimicrobial in its own right, and it's also helpful to the myeloperoxidase pathway, which is important in antifungal immunity. Uh, so it's a good question exactly what the mechanisms are, but definitely some minerals are very important for antifungal immunity, like iodine, copper, chromium, are all helpful. Managing your iron status is important.
On one of your blogs, you wrote that you take Lugol's iodine. Is
No,
that oh
no, I don't. I take a low dose of iodine, like 225 micrograms a day. I did try higher doses uh, for a time. Yeah, but I think they're a little risky, and uh, so I generally just recommend a lower dose of iodine.
What if you were taken in the form of like seaweed? You'd still recommend a lower dose?
Yeah, seaweed is good. So the amount I take, 225 micrograms, is about the equivalent of 4 nori sheets. Um, and most people probably wouldn't eat much more seaweed than that, as a rule.
Right.
Um,
But if you take like dulse, I sprinkle dulse on my food. You could get a
yeah.
lot more than that. The Japanese, I think they get like 3 milligrams a day, 3,000 micrograms.
Well, I think the Japanese who are getting milligram doses are eating some kelp. So kelp has much higher levels of iodine. But kelp isn't necessarily all that safe. So, I think it's better to eat some of the lower iodine seaweeds. And we have seaweed soup fairly often. So we get a good dose. But I think one of the important things for thyroid health is just consistency in the dose. You don't want to have big fluctuations. So you don't want to go a few weeks with no iodine and then get a really huge iodine intake. And if you supplement, um, then the iodine won't be scavenging. I mean, the thyroid gland won't be scavenging iodine aggressively, and so you won't have any problems if you eat a very iodine-rich meal. So I think it's a good precaution to just get in the habit of supplementing daily.
You don't like kelp because of the toxins?
Well, kelp can give you a very high dose of iodine, and you don't want to have big variations in your iodine exposure. And also, it can concentrate heavy metals uh, and other things besides iodine. So it's not quite as safe.
Do you take anything that in your regimen or supplement regimen or that chelates heavy metals?
No. Well, just normal food nutrition. So, your body has its own detoxification and excretion mechanisms when you get in excess of something. And if you eat a fiber-rich diet, so you've got plenty of stool, then that'll make that pathway work. If you keep yourself well hydrated and stocked in electrolytes, then, sweat and urine will work okay. And, so I think you just want to let your body's natural detoxification mechanisms work
Right,
well.
and just stay away from too many toxins, heavy metals.
Yeah, that's right.
What do you think of calories with regard to weight and health? How does the perfect health diet relate to? Are you someone who believes that you should try to reduce calories, or you think that if you just follow the perfect health diet, you'll be good with the calories?
No, I think you should follow the perfect health diet. So what we recommend as far as managing calories is do intermittent fasting. So eat within an 8-hour window in the daytime. So most of your calorie intake should be in the afternoon, and then calibrate your food intake so you're just starting to get mildly hungry at the very end of the overnight fast. And it should be a hunger you can easily ignore. Any kind of distraction will make you forget that you're hungry. Whether it's work or exercise or conversation or anything like that. But if you have nothing occupying you, then you might notice that you're a little hungry. Um, and so that'll be a good level of food intake. And then you just want to eat a balanced, nourishing diet that gets you to the optimal amount of every nutrient simultaneously, and that's how our diet is designed. So I would say, just eating PhD with the right uh, circadian pattern and intermittent fasting, will basically optimize your caloric intake.
Interesting. So you mentioned that you believe that saturated fats are healthy, and so my question is, what are the health benefits of saturated fat, and how many grams do you recommend?
Well, it's important to keep in mind that every nutrient is beneficial in low doses and can become harmful in large doses. So, and also the effects are somewhat context dependent. So if you're eating a very unhealthy diet, uh, then some of the things that you add may look unhealthy, even if they'd be very healthy if you were on a more natural diet. And with saturated fats, I just say they represent around 40% of all the fatty acids in our cell membranes. So they're a major component of our body. They're also the precursor to synthesis of a lot of lipids, including cholesterol and the steroid hormones. So, they're definitely something that our body needs and utilizes in large amounts. And so, they're clearly going to be beneficial, in certain amounts. And, so it's more of a question of what are the contexts in which they can cause problems and, what level is too much.
Mm-hmm. What about, have you seen any studies that if you go lower on the saturated fat, then there's some change in the content of the saturated fat on your membrane?
Well, the composition of membranes tends to be pretty closely regulated. So our cells have a target, and they'll preferentially consume the things that are in the body in excess. And one of the nice things about eating saturated fats is it gives the body a little more control, because the saturated fats can be transformed in many ways. They can be burned for energy. They can be used to synthesize things like cholesterol. They can be desaturated to make monounsaturated fats. And so there's a lot of ways to dispose of them. So you're giving your body a little more degrees of freedom. Whereas if you overeat omega-6 polyunsaturated fats, there's really very little the body can do with them. And so it can be difficult to dispose of an excess. So in many ways, saturated fats are safer than many other types of fat.
I mean, I personally do not do well with saturated fat, but I do realize a lot of people, maybe even most, I don't know, it's hard to say, but a lot of people do well with saturated fat. So it's not something that I recommend against. I'm just curious and I have my own theories of why, but I'm curious what you would say, what you would think, like why somebody would not do well with saturated fat.
In the academic studies, there's a big literature in animal studies. And what happens, saturated fats, they have a peculiar structure. They're very rigid. They're straight and rigid. And so they make a particular structure in our lipid membranes. But they also promote mitochondrial uncoupling. They also can promote generation of reactive oxygen species. And so when people are on energy excess diets, and most people are these days, then saturated fats enable mitochondria to generate more reactive oxygen species than they otherwise would in response to the energy excess. And that can be harmful, especially when you're lacking antioxidants. And if you combine the saturated fats promoting the reactive oxygen generation with a high omega-6 diet that so many people have nowadays from all the vegetable oils, then you can get lipid peroxidation, which can do a lot of harm. But on the other hand, if you're on a calorie-deficient diet, then saturated fats are among the most beneficial that you can have. And so doing things like intermittent fasting, that help your body get rid of excess energy, can really make saturated fats much more healthful.
That's actually a very good answer. I agree with that. I think when people go over on their calories, then that's when the saturated fats really become harmful. What do you think of seafood? And what do you think about the fact that DHA is affected when you cook it? Is that something that you're concerned about?
I think it's generally important to cook foods gently, not to use high heat, and it's generally important to keep seafood fresh. And so that's, for instance, why we don't recommend taking fish oil capsules, because the fish oil can go rancid easily. and it can easily be damaged if you try to cook it at very high temperatures. Um, but uh, I wouldn't worry too much about DHA at gentle cooking methods. So we'll often cook in water. So we'll make a fish curry uh, or a fish stew quite often, and cooking water is very gentle. And so actually, more DHA can degrade in a few weeks in the refrigerator than would degrade in gentle cooking.
So you're not a fan of fish oil supplements, but they do include antioxidants in the fish oil supplements. Certain brands also measure how oxidized it is.
Yeah, some of them do, but they have a tendency to sit on shelves for a long time. So they've done some clinical trials, and generally speaking, people who consume fish in clinical trials improve their health, but people who consume fish oil capsules worsen their health. So I think it's maybe I'm sure there are better fish oil capsules and worse fish oil capsules, but I doubt you can make fish oil capsules that are as good as fish.
That's true. That most the studies do find the most benefits when you eat seafood rather than take fish oil. What about there's popular fermented cod liver oil supplement in the paleosphere now? What do you think of
Yeah,
that?
I'm not a believer. Well, we don't recommend the isolated oils that have been lingering around, and then fermentation is gonna make chemical reactions even more likely. So
You don't think that's any better?
no, I think we do recommend fermented foods, but I don't think fish oil is what I would recommend fermenting.
It sounds good though, fermented fish oil.
Uh,
But yeah,
yeah, it may
it's
sound
good.
good.
It's good.
Yeah,
It's good for
yeah,
marketing.
right. No, it does have things that you want, but we generally prefer, for the fish oil, we generally prefer fresh salmon. For vitamin A, we'd prefer liver, good quality liver. And for the fermentation products, we'd prefer, umami type fermented foods like fish sauce, tamari sauce, aged cheese, fermented vegetables that you make at home. Uh, so I think there are good things in fermented cod liver oil, but I think there's better sources for every good thing, and I think there's some risk to fermented cod liver oil.
So you believe that we've evolved to eat certain foods, or that the modern environment. I mean, like, how much do you place emphasis on a paleo diet versus nutrition versus maybe it's kind of irrelevant. It's just that the modern environment requires a certain diet. Maybe we ate more, carbs in the past, but we're getting less sunlight now, so maybe we should eat less carbs. So how much of it do you think is more like, well, this is the diet that should be healthiest for this environment?
Yeah, no, I don't think the optimal diet varies much with different environments. In fact, in our book, we basically argue that that our nutritional needs were more or less fixed about 500 million years ago. So that's when multicellular life evolved, and the last big change in the structure of creatures, which was the creation of extracellular matrix, which is a relatively carbohydrate-rich fraction of the body. And once we did that, the only things that have been changing since are mostly the relative size of different organs. So humans have a relatively large brain, and compared to the rest of the body, and so that changes our nutritional needs somewhat. And then pretty much the only thing that varies among animals, almost all animals have pretty much the same nutritional needs, and what varies is the digestive tract. And so we evolved to different food niches, like a herbivore versus a carnivore, through changes in our digestive tract. And the digestive tract has to transform the nutrient mix that we eat into the nutrient mix that we need. And it does that through things like fermentation of carbohydrates to transform them into fatty acids, and then synthesize from the short-chain fatty acids the various things that we need. So digestive tracts vary a lot between mammals, and the ecological niche that they're in varies, but the nutrient needs really don't vary that much. I don't think, so what you would see from the Paleolithic till now is, potentially some changes in the digestive tract and metabolic processing. Our ability to cope with malnourishing diets definitely evolves on the time scale that, of the last 10,000 years or so. But the optimal diet in terms of nutrition, that really doesn't evolve much.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you're, a maverick in this regard with in the paleo low carb sphere. With you say that up to 30% of your diet should come from carbs. What is the importance of carbs in the diet?
Well, carbs are used for a wide range of things. So I mentioned that extracellular matrix has a very substantial carbohydrate component. So do some other things like the fluids that lubricate our joints, like the mucus that protects our gut and our sinuses, respiratory tract, and our tears, our saliva. Our immune system uses a lot of glucose in order to fight infections. Our brain needs to consume some glucose. So we have some significant needs for glucose, and so we recommend getting about 30% of calories in an adult, about 40% of calories in a child from carbohydrates. We think that's what's most likely to optimize your health. We also need to provide some carbohydrate fiber to our gut microbiome. And, so that's pretty crucial to long-term health.
That's interesting that you said the immune system needs glucose. What can you just say? A little more technically, what aspect of the immune system needs it?
Well, in order to generate reactive oxygen species, pretty much glucose is the macronutrient which powers that.
Mm-hmm. And so, would that suggest to you that a ketogenic diet might leave some people immunodeficient in some ways?
Yeah, yeah. So very low carb ketogenic diets tend to impair immunity, especially against eukaryotic pathogens. So things like fungi, protozoa, parasitic worms.
Interesting. So, what supplements do you personally take?
I take a low dose of iodine, like I mentioned. I take magnesium. I take vitamin D in the fall through the spring. I often take a little bit of vitamin K2. I take pantothenic acid. I'll take zinc about once a week.
What dosage of pantothenic acid do you take?
500 milligrams. I've varied between once a week to daily.
Why do you take that? For energy?
It's a risk reward question, so it's extremely safe. So there's you can't really do much harm, do any harm, so far as is known by taking it. It's needed to produce coenzyme A, and acetyl coenzyme A is known as the hub of metabolism. It's important both for energy production and for various pathways that synthesize various things the body needs. And you want to have an abundance of that. You don't want to be deficient in it. And one thing I noticed was, I mentioned my health problem started when I took antibiotics for acne. So I had a long time acne problem. And I noticed if I took pantothenic acid that I'd be much less likely to get pimples. So that suggests to me that, it is easy to get a mild pantothenic acid deficiency. And you may not want to rely on food only. So since it's safe and I think there's a reasonable chance of benefits, then I think it makes sense to supplement.
I'm taking it based on our discussion before that you're not a fan of Lugol's. You don't recommend that to anybody?
Well, I think it's fine to buy it, but the dose is very large. So what I would do if you buy it is dilute it 30-fold or so. So they come in these little 1 ounce bottles, and what I would do is buy a 1 liter bottle or 1 quart bottle of say water, and take out 1 ounce and pour the 1 ounce Lugol's bottle into there, and then just use the dropper and take out 1 drop a day from the 1 liter bottle.
What do you think of the people who claim to get benefits from taking like 50 milligrams of Lugol's, of iodine from Lugol's?
It's possible, so 100 years ago, high doses of iodine was a standard medical treatment, and it's basically used like we would use antibiotics today, and not uncommonly it would work. So it can work, but it's risky. You're risking damage to the thyroid gland, and you'll be at higher risk of hyperthyroidism and thyroiditis, thyroid injury. So I think uh, unless I would consider that a somewhat risky thing to do, rather akin to taking a pharmaceutical drug, and it should only be done if it's therapeutic for a condition you have, and you're being careful in how you do it.
Mm-hmm. So, what in your framework of, let's say, chronic disease, what do you think of the pillars are of chronic disease? The more of the biology of chronic disease, like let's say mitochondrial dysfunction, you know, something like that along those lines.
All of those happen. They tend to happen uh, when the diet is malnourishing or unbalanced. So unbalanced means uh, that the things you're deficient in will tend to drive appetite, so tend to have an excess of other things, and that can lead to toxicity, or if you have an excess of energy, it can lead to reactive oxygen species being generated, and you're having too much oxidative stress. Um, so I would locate the fundamental causes mainly in diet, in lifestyle, which is mainly circadian rhythm disruption, is the biggest cause of disease from a lifestyle point of view, and then infections. And nowadays we've done a pretty good job of getting rid of most acute infections, but medicine really hasn't done that much about chronic infections, and I think that's still a major factor in disease.
Beyond diet, what would you recommend if somebody had like chronic infections, as far as maybe nutrition or supplements, or what's your opinion?
Yeah, well, circadian rhythm entrainment is very important for immune function. Intermittent fasting can be a big aid to immune function. Um, and then good nourishment. So some nutrients are really important for immune function. Vitamin A, vitamin D are really crucial for mucosal immunity. Some of the antioxidants, uh, glutathione, and some minerals are really important for systemic immunity. And you also typically in infections, you'll also have wound healing issues. So pathogens will do things like break down extracellular matrix so that they can uh, traverse the body a little bit better, and then you need to heal it. So you need to give yourself proper nourishment for wound healing. So there's a variety of aspects that figure in, and but fortunately, it's pretty much the same advice for just about any major health condition. You want to be well nourished. You want to give your body the inputs it needs, and usually your body can take care of itself pretty well if you do that.
What's your opinion of why psychological stress is so bad? Is that because of impaired immunity?
Yeah, well, it affects a lot of things. I would say it's mainly bad through circadian rhythm disruption. So we're meant to experience stress in the daytime. We're not meant to experience stress at night. And I think stress in the daytime is normally okay. But it's just but people carry their stress with them, into the night, and it disrupts their nighttime rhythms. And that's the time of immunity. It's the time of wound healing, and so those are the things that tend to get disrupted when you're under stress.
That's fascinating because I actually have the same. I have the same position, and I don't. I don't think. I think very few people appreciate that. That the reason why stress is so bad is because it disrupts your circadian rhythm. And I actually think that the specific hormone responsible for that is corticotropin releasing hormone, and that has the most effect on the circadian rhythm in the stress pathway. So that's very interesting that that you realize that.
Uh, well, circadian rhythms are really crucial because that's how, we've got 1 trillion cells in our body, and it's through circadian rhythms, basically these clocks. All these cells have their clocks, and just like in the spy movies, where in order to pull off their mission, the spies have to synchronize their watches at the start of the movie. In the same way, all of our cells have to synchronize their clocks in order to coordinate their activities and make us healthy. And if you're not entraining circadian rhythms, then you're not sending the signals that allow all the cells to synchronize their clocks. And so once you do that, then they're no longer coordinating with each other. The various organs of the body are not coordinating with each other, and certain functions will just not get performed the way they should be, including maintenance of the body. And so it's really a coordination issue. And there's no function in the body that can be successfully fulfilled by one cell working by itself. Everything needs coordination of many, many cells, and it's just the way our biology is. We can't achieve intercellular coordination without circadian rhythm entrainment.
Right. So you think, like, let's say hormones, you think that's like a big one as far as in the immune system? If that's not entrained, that you would say that that's a significant cause of the problems people get when they bring that out of whack.
Yeah. It's so immunity is definitely affected. Wound healing is affected, and all kinds of mitogenesis, DNA repair, various functions that are diminished if we disrupt our circadian rhythms.
Interesting. Which aspects do you find are low in people in, let's say, the modern environment? Aspects of the immune system, because the immune system is quite complex.
Yeah, that's for sure. I prefer not to try to analyze mechanisms within the body, like molecular networks and things like that, because they're much more complicated. It's much simpler to deal at the level of inputs. And I would say most people today are circadian rhythm disrupted to some degree. Most people are malnourished in certain ways. So, for instance, they're not getting enough extracellular matrix in their diets. That's because they don't make soups and stews with a lot of bones and joint material, so they're just eating muscle meats. And so they're missing some of the nutrients found in extracellular matrix. They're not getting, some of the other nutrients found in organ meats. People tend to be low in vitamin A. They're not getting enough sunshine. They're also generally not feeding their gut microbiome as well as they should be, and that's in large part due to eating processed foods, which tend to be low in fiber. So there's a lot of things that people are commonly missing, and in our health retreats we do free health coaching, and it's very often many of the same points of emphasis come up in the common diseases. People are deficient in wound healing. They're deficient in mucosal immunity. They're missing digestive nutrients like nutrients to produce bile.
Mm-hmm. Which nutrients are those?
Well, primarily the ones people are most lacking in are vitamin C and taurine and glycine, which conjugate bile. And glycine is also an important amino acid in collagen. And taurine is also a donor of sulfur, and sulfates are very abundant in extracellular matrix. So the fact that people are starved of extracellular matrix means that the same nutrients appear in bile and extracellular matrix, and basically diverting them to help maintain extracellular matrix, and you're not producing as much bile as you should.
Mm-hmm. And do you think like if you take collagen, that could supplant the bone broth, or you think there's more things in bone broth that
Yeah,
collagen doesn't?
there's more things in bone broth. The collagen certainly helps. So there's a lot of evidence that when people supplement collagen, their health gets better. But I think they do even better if they ate a natural whole foods.
What's in bone broth that collagen doesn't have? Would you happen to know that?
Um, well, for instance, you have a lot of compounds that are joined by sulfates to carbohydrate molecules. So there's a lot of proteoglycans, glycoproteins in extracellular matrix. And, so minerals like sulfur and silicon, you would, are not in collagen, but are very abundant in extracellular matrix. And then the carbohydrate component as well. And it could be that eating some of the specialized carbohydrates rather than eating glucose and synthesizing them.
What do you think about when I eat chicken? I eat the marrow and the bones. You're a fan of that?
It depends on quantity. So you can overdose on bones. You can overdose on calcium and phosphorus. But in moderation, I wouldn't object to it.
Now, since sleep is so crucial for health, I'm curious what, I guess you could say, sleep hacks that you use to get a good night's rest.
Well, I don't really believe in hacks. I believe in healthy living. And I think the important thing to realize is that circadian rhythms, every influence on your circadian rhythms that you give has an impact for 48 hours or so. And so your sleep is affected by everything you've done for the prior 48 hours. And there are a number of Zeitgebers, which are time givers to the circadian rhythm system. And you need to control all of the Zeitgebers at every moment of the prior 48 hours in order to have the best possible sleep and control your sleep environment. And so there are a lot of factors that go into optimizing sleep.
So basically, take care of your circadian rhythm and your sleep will be good.
That's the biggest impact. And you don't want to have any nutritional deficiencies, so those can make your brain a little bit anxious at night.
Like magnesium?
There's a variety of things. It's often in when people are too low carb, they'll wake at night or have impaired sleep quality. When food is scarce, then the brain wants you to look for food, whenever it's available. And if food is available at night, but there's no food during the day, then food will become the dominant Zeitgeber. It will replace light as the dominant Zeitgeber, and your daytime will move to nighttime. Your time of activity will move to the night, and your time of sleep will move to the day. And but if you're working during the day, and your brain is, you do a lot of nighttime eating, then your brain will, and if you're dieting, so that you're restricting calories, so your brain thinks you're in danger of starvation, then it's going to keep you up all night. And so there's a lot of ways you can disrupt sleep.
Right. I would probably include that all in the circadian rhythm. If you eat in the daytime, not 3-4 hours before bed. But yeah, that's great. Which toxins do you believe are the worst?
Well, whichever ones you're consuming. That's a tricky question. I'm not sure. So I don't think it's really known. So different people would give different answers. So some people would say it's the ones in our staple foods. So things like wheat and soy. Because we consume so much of them. So like wheat is a quarter of people's food intake. And so even if you don't think wheat toxins are all that damaging, you're still getting quite a bit of them every day. We do have various environmental compounds in our industrial world that we weren't exposed to before, and endocrine disruptors and other things. And there are people who think those are significant. We definitely know that lead, when we had lead in gasoline and lead in paint, that had a huge health impact, negative health impact. Um, so heavy metals can be a problem. But I think it's going to be quite variable. So in different places, people in China are exposed to a lot more toxins than people in the U.S., generally speaking, and different toxins. And so it's a little hard to generalize about that.
As being a physicist, I'm curious what your opinion are of EMFs, the low frequency EMFs such as computers, television, things like that, and Wi-Fi and cellular phones.
Well, let's hope they're not too damaging because it's really hard to avoid them. In our modern world, we're just in this very microwave-rich environment these days. And of course, we've been exposed to 60 hertz radiation for well over 100 years now, and microwaves have been, pretty common for 20 years now, and so it's to some degree, it's an experiment. The problem is, a lot of the things we care about in terms of practical health effects, they're pretty subtle. They may show up in some fraction of the population after 70 years of exposure. And we care about that. If we're dying at 75 instead of 85, that's a big difference to us. But it's really hard to detect. If something is only showing effects after 75 years, then it's really hard to do a study which detects it and validates it. So we really have this gap. Science can only detect really big negative effects, and we don't really know what we're doing to ourselves with the EMF environment that we have.
That's a very good answer. What do you think of microwaving food?
Oh, I think that's an excellent way of cooking.
You think you like it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very gentle cooking method. It does little to modify food, little to destroy nutrients and little to create toxins. So it's a good cooking method. It's a very convenient reheating method, and leftovers are a very big part of our diet. It's actually many foods improve their quality if you cook them in advance and then refrigerate them, especially starches, because you generate more fiber that way. And it's also very good for your circadian rhythms to be able to cook in the evening and then eat in the daytime. So it's not very convenient for a lot of people to, take an hour off in the middle of the workday in order to cook their lunch. And, but we want to get most of our calories in the early afternoon if we can. And we want to eat home-cooked food if we can. And so the only way to square that circle is to cook in advance and eat leftovers. And microwave ovens make eating leftovers much more convenient.
I should have asked this before, but how many hours before sleep do you eat? Do you recommend not eating?
In general, you should finish most of your calorie consumption about 4 hours before you go to bed, with the exception of potentially a light dessert, maybe 3 hours before you go to bed. So that would be like something sweet, like fruit or berries would be good, or possibly milk. Warm milk with honey and turmeric is a good dessert.
What about like right before bed taking collagen? Is that something you think would throw off the circadian rhythm?
Yeah, I would eat collagen in the daytime.
And what about a lot of people take honey before bed? You think that would throw it off?
That's a good dessert, so I recommend getting dessert right about your transition from daytime to nighttime, and then going to bed maybe 3 hours into the nighttime. If your daytime is 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., then have dessert at 8 p.m., go to bed at 11 p.m. If your daytime is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., then have dessert at 7 p.m., go to bed at 10 p.m.
So you wouldn't eat honey right before bed?
No. I think if If lack of carbs is disrupting your sleep, then you should be eating more carbs in the daytime. All right, so when people are too low carb, then they'll see that if they eat honey just before bed, that their sleep will improve. All right, but instead of eating the honey at 10 p.m., they should be eating more carbs in the afternoon. And your body can store enough carbs to last the night.
Hmm. What do you think the main cause of fatigue is, and fatigue after meals? Have you ever experienced fatigue after meals?
Yeah, that's very common. It's due to immune activity. So any kind of immune activity is going to make you fatigued, and any kind of leaky gut, endotoxemia, any kind of infection that feeds on food, like if you have a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or some kind of infection in the gut, then you'll get inflammation. If you have a leaky gut and undigested food peptides are getting into your body, and you have food sensitivities, then you'll get a big burst of immune activity after food. If you have an endotoxemia, you get fragments of dead gut bacteria coming into the body, and bacterial cell wall components are very immunogenic. So food can easily lead to 3 or 4 hours of high immune activity, and that can make you fatigued. It can give you brain fog. It can give you other symptoms.
Do you ever get fatigue now after meals?
Uh, no, no.
I hear. Uh, and what do you think the cause of, like, let's say, bad circulation is?
Uh, well, there's a number of causes of poor vascular health, and just about every factor of malnutrition, lack of circadian rhythm entrainment, lack of exercise can impact vascular health.
Hmm. Now, can you list the order of importance of the following? I'll send this to you.
Yeah, well, that's a long list. I guess I'd put circadian rhythms number one. But for me, that encompasses, you mentioned sunshine, exercise. So light is one of the most important time givers to the circadian rhythm system. Exercise is important. Sleep is very important. Um, uh, let's see. Um, yeah, diet would probably be next after circadian rhythms. Genes, I really don't think genes are that important for most people. Of course, they can be crucially important for some people. But, for most people, most genetic mutations, they'll only reach abundance in the population if they have benefits as well as costs. Um, and, so it's more a matter of context. And generally, any abundant gene will not impair your health if you're living optimally. So they may make you more or less tolerant of a bad diet, bad lifestyle, but they'll never make you, or almost never make you intolerant of an optimal diet and lifestyle. And so as long as you're doing things well, then genes are generally not a big impact on health.
Psychological stress there would go within the circadian rhythm, you think?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
The blue light. Okay, I hear that. And what about environmental toxins? Where does that fall?
Well, that's very variable. So some people, it depends on your local environment. Some people have, really bad exposures. I would say most people in the United States aren't really exposed to a lot of environmental toxins.
So you think it's kind of low on the totem pole?
I mean, definitely some things can matter. Air pollution matters. But we cleaned that up a lot over the last 40, 50 years. Um, water quality matters, but again, that's relatively clean these days.
What kind of water do you drink?
Well, we use a Brita filter on tap water for the most part.
What are your top 3 tips to perform better?
Circadian rhythm entrainment, nourishing balanced diet, intermittent fasting, I guess I would say. Intermittent fasting is a long run it doesn't necessarily have a lot of immediate rewards, but over time, I think it's going to have a big impact on longevity.
And actually, I forgot to ask this before. I'm curious how you claim that you have health problems growing up. How did you become an astrophysicist at MIT and work at Harvard during those years when you were having those health issues?
Well, it's funny. Health it doesn't necessarily impair every aspect of what you can do. Some people are very good at some cognitive tasks and weak at others, and so it's interesting some of those developmental impacts. I was always very shy as a child, and introspective, bookish, and I think that made me a little more inclined to go into an academic field.
Hmm. That's interesting. So your brain didn't really get the brunt of your health issues at all. You're saying it was mainly just other factors.
Yeah, I doubt. I don't think my brain. I think it may have been impacted by uh, in in some ways, but I think it was more a shift in direction. Uh, so maybe uh, some parts of my brain are a little stronger than others, and some parts of my brain are a little weaker. And I think that's actually part of evolution's plan. It's good to have some specialization in society and some diversification of what people are good at. So society wouldn't function as well if everyone were identical. And so they evolution created a meta evolution, a system that builds in some variability.
Did you find your cognitive function improved as you became healthier?
Yeah, oh, definitely. So I had very severe memory loss when I was at my worst, and I would try to write things, and I couldn't remember what I'd written in the previous paragraph. I would forget all the facts that had intended to use to illustrate something. I would forget where to find them.
How old were you when this happened?
In my 30s and early 40s, yeah.
Okay, so you already went through the schooling and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now, where can people find you? And yeah, and what's the name of your book that they can purchase?
Yeah, our website is perfecthealthdiet.com, and our book, Perfect Health Diet, Regain Health and Lose Weight by eating the way you were meant to eat. And we have a health retreat, the Perfect Health Retreat. It's at a luxury property on the beach. We've got 2 heated saltwater pools, 2 saltwater hot tubs, great food, and great health coaching, trainers, training in relaxation as well as activity, and complete education on how to be healthy for the rest of your life. And it's a great deal.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for the interview, and I look forward to your future books.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe.
Have a great day.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.